Welcome to the Call to Freedom. It's April the 22nd, 2019. I'm your host, as always, Aria, joined in the studio today by
Melanie
and Michael Hampton.
And, of course, it's a start of a new week. I didn't sleep at all last night again.
Again?
Yeah, again.
Oh.
I don't know.
Why
this
not?
weekly insomnia thing is really starting to be kind of a problem. I don't know why not. I ended up...
Have you tried Valium?
No. I gave up.
That's kind of an extreme first step, huh?
Well, I mean, if you're going to solve a problem, you might as well solve it, right? But no, so I finally went to sleep, I think, at about 9:30 this morning, and ended up waking up at about 1:30.
Yeah, that's not so great.
No, but, it's my off day, so it doesn't matter. I can go without sleep. I've got a monster here, so I'll be okay.
Yeah, probably.
So the most interesting thing to come out of the last few days from me, Melanie, because you hate cops perhaps more than I do, because I don't really hate cops. I just don't approve of what they do. But the Connecticut police officers who opened fire into a car on two people because,
Oh, no, I haven't heard this one.
Because the car resembled one that had been used in an armed robbery.
Because we don't like mass-produced cars or anything like that.
Certainly not.
No two look alike. So if you meet the description, it must be that car.
It's really alarming that you don't have to do anything. You don't have to even be in the wrong place at the wrong time. You just have to sort of vaguely resemble someone who was. That's all it takes to get shot.
They didn't even vaguely resemble the people. The car was like, this meets the description of a car. Like, there's only so many types of cars.
What was it? Just like a white four-door or something?
I don't know the exact make and model of the car.
I'd love to hear the details on this and find out why they thought they could do this.
Because they're cops. They're used to doing whatever they want and shooting people who don't comply. Speaking of cops, I had a state trooper trying really, really hard to get me Saturday night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And, I mean, it was obvious that he was trying to do it. I was driving home from work. It was like 3:30 in the morning, something like that.
Well, there's your mistake right there.
What?
Driving home from work.
Well, got to get back home somehow.
Yeah, that's the way you do it.
You're right. How dare I peacefully go about my existence expecting not to be aggressed against? I was asking for trouble.
I don't have problems now because I don't typically drive home late, but yeah, that'll do it. That's it. That's all you got to do.
Well,
have a night job.
Sure. I mean, especially on a Saturday night here in Keene. That's why our manager's really cool about this. So she gave me an extra shirt to carry in my car at all times for when I get pulled over at like 3:30 in the morning. I can just be like, no, look, man, I'm just coming back from work. Just leave me alone. I haven't been out drinking. I'm just trying to get home. So that was really cool of her. But like I was heading down Marlborough Street here, because that's the fastest way to get home because you don't have to wait for the light there at Optical Drive. And I saw the state trooper stop, turn around, and get behind me. Luckily, there was another car back there, so I didn't really have to worry too much about it. But so I pulled over to use my phone for a minute into a parking lot. And about 3 minutes later, he came back by, and then he came back by again. And the state troopers here, they know me. They don't care much for me because I refuse to. Well, I don't refuse to, but getting my registration fixed is proving problematic when I send $50 to my family in Arkansas and they use it to buy Suboxone instead of So it's a bit problematic there, and they don't care much for it. But they didn't get behind me because I saw what he was doing. You know, it's interesting to me that the predators are out at night even today.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately what they were doing. That's the only time I'm at risk of being pulled over is at night.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
That's the only time when I have to worry about the predators coming out of the shadows to get me.
Cops are basically vampires.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, they are blood-sucking, parasitic vampires.
They're
Absolutely.
allergic to daylight.
So eventually, he went the other way, and I timed it well to just get out there because I knew the light would turn. And unless he was going to run a red light to, harass me for driving the speed limit at 3:30 in the morning, he was going to let me go on about my day. Or he wasn't going to be able to catch me, rather. So I got home, and then I went out to smoke a few minutes later, and sure enough, right in front of the house, he had pulled somebody over. Just jerk behavior, generally. So cops suck. But I at least didn't get shot. So protesters have taken to the streets in Connecticut to voice their outrage over the shooting of an unarmed couple inside their car earlier this week. It happened Tuesday morning, and it left a 22-year-old Stephanie Washington hospitalized after two officers opened fire on the car she was sitting in with her boyfriend. So it wasn't just one cop getting out, trigger happy, shooting this couple for sitting in their car. It was two of them. And neither one of them had the presence to be like, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't shoot into this random vehicle.
Yeah, no plate number. They're not acting. They're just sitting there.
So surveillance video showed a Hamden Police Department officer arrive on the scene, jump out of his car, and unload a barrage of bullets on a red Honda that police said fit the description of a car involved in an armed robbery. So it was a red Honda.
There are millions of red Hondas in every town in America.
There are. Well, I don't know about millions, but there's certainly a lot.
They're everywhere.
Doesn't Chris Wade, who joins us on Tuesday, doesn't he drive a red Honda?
Yeah.
Yeah. But don't go to Connecticut, Chris.
Mark has a red car. I'm not sure if it's a Honda or not, but it is a Honda. Yeah.
A Yale University officer shot from the other side before sprinting away from the scene.
What?
Yeah. That surprises me as well.
Wait, he was shot, or he shot into the... That makes it sound like he shot into the car. He
shot into the car from the passenger side or the driver's side, whichever. So a police department cop shot into one side of the vehicle, and a cop from Yale University, because they certainly need armed guards, shot into the other side of the vehicle and then took off running, apparently.
What the hell?
Hey, maybe this was a bad idea. I'm going to go to prison for murder. So I've heard gunshots before, but it's a different feeling when somebody's shooting at you when the police are shooting at you, Witherspoon said. Authorities claim the officers fired because the driver of the car made an abrupt movement and ignored commands from officers. No weapons were found in the car. So, I mean, that's the problem right there. The cops are entitled, and they think that, you know, if they stop you and they give you a command for whatever reason and you don't obey it, then they get to shoot you.
And if you're shooting someone through the windshield, they probably can't hear you talking at them.
Yeah, one would imagine they probably had their windows rolled up. It's not like super hot at midnight in Connecticut right now. It's warm, I guess, but...
Yeah, it's spring.
So the incident betrays police activity gone horribly wrong along the Hamden-New Haven line. And now Stephanie, as well as many residents, her family, her friends, must live with the consequences and resulting uncertainty of what was, by every definition, an unacceptable response, said the New Haven mayor. To me, it's really, as I was saying a moment ago, it's not good. And I can't help but think that, you know, now we have a sense of what black people in America feel like, since, you know, they all vaguely resemble armed suspects or whatever. And that's generally the excuse that cops use to shoot at them.
Yeah, they vaguely resemble that. Well,
but now it's not just limited to that. And that, of course, is its own problem. I mean, it's an issue and it shouldn't be happening. But now that it's expanded to include everyone, maybe we'll finally get something done about police violence.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not going to hold my breath.
Don't hold your breath. You're gonna be holding your breath a long time, because they are experts at making excuses for themselves and avoiding accountability.
I think that the people who are going to support police are going to sit here and say, well, there's 300 million people, and with an acceptable failure rate, this will still happen every now and then. It's like,
I don't consider.
No, you don't, because you're sane.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. And I would think most of the people who are licking the boots like that are probably not sane.
No.
Because they haven't really given serious consideration to the fact that this really could have been them. You know, just sitting outside of a store waiting on your spouse to come back out. The police pull up and they shoot you.
Most people don't until it is them.
This is the Call to Freedom. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom, and as always, you're invited to give us a call. That number is 603-283-6160. Again, that's 603-283-6160. Or you can use the Discord call-in lines, which you can find at discord.lrn.fm. And we've been talking about this incident that happened, this murder. Well, I don't know if anybody's
survived,
dead.
Didn't they?
I don't know. But this incident where the police got out of their vehicle and opened fire onto this couple who were sitting in their car because their car was a red Honda, like thousands at least of others in the state of Connecticut. And that was enough to justify to this police officer shooting them, or rather issuing commands to them like he was some kind of authority that had to be obeyed, and then shooting them when they made an abrupt movement.
Well, see, they're cops. They have guns, and if you don't obey their commands, they get to shoot you. And nobody bats an eye. Nobody cares.
Too.
And those aren't even necessarily compatible, so it doesn't say what the command was. Cops will often command you to make an abrupt movement and then shoot you for doing so.
Yeah, that happened just the other day when they told a guy to drop his gun. He dropped the gun, and they shot him. And
not to mention there was the guy in the hotel room who was
you told me
who was playing like Simon Says with the police, and they were like, "Cross your legs, now crawl to us, keep your head down," and all of these other things, and they just unloaded into him. So it's definitely common that anybody who doesn't obey commands from police gets shot. And it stands a stark contrast to like the Dylan Noble shooting, which I was also not a fan of. But at least then, he was walking toward them, clearly ignoring their commands. They were telling him to stop approaching and things like that. So they shot him, and then they continued to shoot him, which was where the problem came in at. But if we're going to have a police force, I understand the tendency of cops to shoot people when they give you the command to stop approaching them and you continue to do it.
Right, yeah. So one of those is at least justifiable under statist mythology. So if you're going to say that there should be these people
even
who
self-defense,
have these
I would say. Like if I told somebody to stop approaching me and they kept doing it, I would be justified to shoot them.
Well, not necessarily.
If I had reason to believe they were a threat, as they did with Dylan Noble. Because some busybody out there called the police and said, "Hey, this guy's driving around with a loaded gun."
Well, that's not a threat. I drive around with a loaded gun all the time. Every time I get in the car, I drive around with a loaded gun.
Well, that wasn't
everybody.
Boston.
That wasn't the exact police report, obviously. I think it was something like he was driving around threatening people or something like that.
Well, there are exact police reports that are pretty much that word for word. So
that he was just driving around with a gun?
Yeah.
Or that someone was just driving around with a gun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. And then you have Kelly Thomas, of course, who was just sort of existing when 15 cops, ganged up on him and beat him to death with a flashlight. Which, I mean, as far as dying goes, I think I would just rather be shot.
Well, yeah. I mean, shooting is, as far as methods of execution, shooting is among the humane ones, if there is such a thing.
Yeah.
If you place your shot right.
Yeah, true.
Well, yeah, and cops can't really aim that good.
No, they really can't. And they don't know what to do after they have shot somebody. And that's what struck me about the Dylan Noble shooting, was that they shot this guy in the chest. He went down, and instead of, jumping on him and putting him in handcuffs or anything like that, they just continued to stand there shouting commands at him and shooting him while he's laying on the ground. They're like, stop reaching for your stomach. I mean, he just got shot, dude.
Yeah.
He's a wounded animal at this point. It's human nature to reach for that wound and put pressure on it.
It's everything nature.
And not to mention, he's kind of dazed in the first place. He's clearly out of it, not all there, whether he's had a stroke or what. And they just stand there continuing to issue commands at him and shooting him with what appeared to be a sawed-off shotgun and a pistol. Just total lack of training, but, we're supposed to be calm and respectful.
With a gun in our face.
With a gun in our face, yeah. So the whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. The police state here in the United States, and I don't want to call it a police state, really, because I don't like that particular term, But we do have an out-of-control police force, and things like this demonstrate it clearly, but, it raises the question of what can even be done about this other than shooting at cops on sight?
I don't know. I've thought about it, and I've got nothing.
Well, yeah, that's kind of why I'm not going to... And I will leave the exact, appropriate timing to that to people who are more educated in military strategy than I am, but that's why I'm not willing to foreclose that option.
Yeah,
I'm surprised it hasn't happened already.
I mean, it's not like there's not places in America where that doesn't happen.
No, it happened in Texas. And there was the former cop who did it. The guy who looks just like LL Cool J. I don't remember his name now. The one in California.
California was Michael Donner, I think.
Yeah, that was it. So, I mean, it has certainly happened before, but I think that sort of thing, as you said, it's not my call to make or anything like that. We certainly have to have significantly more numbers to make something like that effective. Otherwise, you're just throwing your life away, right?
Yeah, so strategically, I would have problems with that at the moment, but I would also defer to people who are educated in strategy of that sort of thing. So it just seems like an overwhelmingly bad idea at the time, although I'm kind of saying that from a position of somebody who kind of has a lot to lose. If that's not you, you make your own decisions. I mean...
I do not advocate for shooting police officers. I want to be clear on that. I think that society will ultimately have to do that. Or I think that the individuals out there will have to ultimately defend themselves against the aggressions committed by the state. That is how I'm going to phrase that.
It's coming.
Yeah. But that's one of the things that struck me as most interesting about the state trooper who was trying to get me Saturday morning is that I'm really just going about my life here. That's all I'm doing, man. And you're out to aggress against me.
They are just dead convinced that anybody on the road between like 10 p.m. and like 5 a.m. is just stoned and drunk out of their mind, which is weird because they're on the road following you around, and presumably they're not stoned and drunk out of their minds.
And they often make it significantly more dangerous. I'm not from New Hampshire. Where I'm from, it doesn't snow a lot. And when it does snow, every single time, it doesn't matter if it's a half an inch of snow, some idiot is going to drive at 60 miles per hour and crash into a tree and die.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't have a lot of experience driving on, 18 inches of snow or whatever. But here I had to do it. And I got to say, it did not help matters when the police tailgated me at 2 o'clock in the morning while it was snowing and there was already 18 inches on the ground.
I mean, that's kind of brave on their behalf, too, because, I know they're in those metal cars, but there's a lot of mountains with cliffs on the roads in New Hampshire, especially in Keene. So...
yeah, I wouldn't want to go down.
Especially if I think you're doing something wrong, if I think you're impaired, if I think you're a fugitive. I mean, that's dangerous on my part to just be that close.
It is, but of course, the rules don't apply to them.
The rules of physics still apply to them.
Oh, yes, they do.
That is true. The laws of physics apply whether you believe in them or not, and whether you have a badge or not. This is the Call to Freedom. We're going to talk more about the wrongdoings of cops, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom, and we've been talking about the most recent cop shooting that has been making national news, where the police decided that this couple sitting in a red Honda were suspiciously similar to a vehicle that was used in an armed robbery, so got out of the car, issuing some sort of command. As far as I'm aware, it hasn't been made clear what command that was. It was probably something stupid, something that the cop had no right to demand of them in the first place.
Or something physically impossible, because they do that too.
Yeah, most likely.
And then decided, hey, you know what? I'm just going to shoot these people. Seems to be how it played out. But we're going to go now to Tross, who is calling in from Daytona. Tross, what's on your mind?
Hey, so I recently saw in the news on the subreddit Not the Onion that George Zimmerman is banned from Tinder.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, that's real. They cited safety concerns, in terms of, legality. Tinder's, that's their platform. They can ban whoever they want.
Fair enough.
That's up to them. You know what I mean? Like, nothing wrong there. Do it, guys. That's your prerogative. But the shooting of Trayvon Martin, I feel like, is a case study of shootings, because if it's reported correctly and it's all the facts, it is so cut and dry that George Zimmerman was justified. Trayvon Martin was on top of him, and he was bashing George's head into the concrete. Like, after the shooting, George's face was bloodied, his nose was broken, and then they have people that said, "Oh, he was just a little boy, with some Skittles and Sprite and a dream, going home."
Well, I don't know how you could possibly conclude that, because there's no video, there's no witnesses even, like, there's no evidence whatsoever.
It's because of the hospital records. Like, you have the hospital records.
The hospital records said this guy was on top of this other guy. Like, I don't know.
No. The hospital records say that his nose was broken, and his DNA was all over Trayvon's hands. So, you had George's DNA on Trayvon's hands. You had the hospital records of him with the broken nose.
Right,
and
but
the mugshots.
That's not what hospital records conclude, and that's not what hospital records purport to conclude.
The hospital records show, the broken nose. He went and they had the broken nose because they had to treat him. All that's documented,
Like, I'm not denying that he was injured. Like, that's not in dispute. What's in dispute and indeterminable is who started it, why they started it.
It doesn't matter who started it. If he was being attacked, he had the right to defend himself.
Well, it absolutely didn't matter who started it.
So
if I go and start a fight with somebody, and I start losing,
how he started
and I start losing that fight, I'm not justified in shooting them because I'm aggressing against them. That's just escalating my aggression into murder, right?
So if hypothetically George was
LRN.FM,
almost, and I don't even think he was trying to be trollish about that, disappointing. You did not get on the air, sorry to inform you of that. We have this little thing called a dump button. You got 4 year people on YouTube to see, so whole 9 people saw that.
9 people.
Woohoo. So the Trayvon Martin incident, of course we'll never actually know what really happened. All we'll know is that there is evidence that, Trayvon Martin was beating the crap out of George Zimmerman. I wouldn't be terribly surprised, but George Zimmerman was doing this little thing as part of the Neighborhood Watch or something to that effect, right?
Or at least he said he was.
Well, and there was evidence that he was a member of the Neighborhood Watch, but, we'll never know what happened that night because the only person who was there and still alive has a incredibly vested interest in one side of the story. So,
that's true.
There's no evidence of what happened either way, of him being innocent or guilty of this from a moral standpoint or even from a legal standpoint. So I don't know how anybody can say this person was right or this person was wrong.
I mean, that's true. That's generally going to be true anyway, but we can infer a general outline of what happened based on the remaining evidence. Like George Zimmerman's DNA being on Trayvon Martin's knuckles or whatever. That's, we may not have been there, but we can pretty definitively conclude that Trayvon Martin punched George
All right,
Zimmerman.
So there is a fight, but that tells me nothing of any significance.
Doesn't say who started it.
No, George Zimmerman certainly started it. Doing his little, I'm out here protecting the neighborhood from thieves and things like that. Oh, look, there's a black guy in a hoodie. I need to go find out what he's doing. And he did a typical cop thing, even though he wasn't a cop. He approached this kid and was like, hey, what are you doing out here? And the kid was like, man, I don't have to talk to you. Mind your own business. And so I'm sure Zimmerman got a bit pushy. And I'm speculating here based on what I know of human nature and how these sort of people behave. So Zimmerman was trying to like, well, yeah, you do, because I'm the sheriff around these parts, son. Or some kind of stupid nonsense like that. He wouldn't have said that, but that would have been the general message he conveyed.
I could see somebody standing there being like, you do have to talk to me. I'm the Neighborhood Watch.
Yeah.
I could see that. And that is about what my speculation is, but I don't know that.
No, I admit I don't know that. But based on what I know of humans, that's pretty much.
Yeah, I think Zimmerman got up and was like, let me go and, start some trouble.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the neighborhood watch is. I mean, it's some busybodies who don't have anything better to do in their time, staring out their windows, trying to catch their neighbor smoking a doobie in their driveway or something like that.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So there's this, he wasn't even white, right?
No, he's technically Hispanic.
Yeah, but it was accused of, racism. He's this white guy who hates black kids or whatever. I mean, he may be a Hispanic guy who hates black kids. I don't know. I don't know what his motivation was. But I imagine he did see this young black kid walking and assume that the kid was a thug.
Yeah,
probably peering out of his window.
Probably what happens.
Peering outside of his window at 11 o'clock at night going, who's that? Why is he in my neighborhood? No. We can't have this.
And then he didn't exactly act like the most upstanding person after the trial either. So
no, he was banned from Tinder, though, I saw. And it was because of safety concerns, not for him, but for the people he might meet on Tinder, which I think is silly. Because
it is silly because it's not like the rest of Tinder is safe anyway.
No, but it makes him out to be like this, Ted Bundy style psychopath who's out there just murdering people.
Yeah. I also don't think that it's newsworthy for dating sites announce when they kick people off.
Yeah, this is kind of ridiculous.
I don't know why it was.
Why would Tinder do that in the first place, and why would they make a national news out of it?
Well, they also kicked off Christopher Cantwell.
Well, yeah, that one I can see. I mean,
but why is that different?
Well, Christopher Cantwell is the crying Nazi.
Yeah.
George Zimmerman shot someone to death.
Yeah, but he was defending himself.
You don't know that, and neither does Tinder and OkCupid.
Well, he had a trial. They found him not guilty. What more do we have?
Well, we have nothing. That's why we don't know that. It's the proper response when you don't know something is, I don't know, not, well, the state said.
Well, I mean, in this case...
And technically, the state said, I don't know, because the verdicts aren't guilty or innocent. The verdicts are guilty and not guilty.
Right. Which is what I was about to get at, is that, I don't know what he did, but I realize that as an individual, I have no expectation and no requirement to assume that people are innocent until they're proven guilty. But I still think that's a preferable approach to assuming people's guilt.
Yeah.
Whether you're an individual or whether you're a state. So to me, I'm willing to assume that he's not guilty until I have incontrovertible evidence otherwise.
I don't even necessarily have that big of a problem with Tinder or anybody kicking him off. I just think it's obnoxious for them to then go be like, hey, CNN, guess what?
Well, I don't know how it became a national news story. They may have just done it and he
because they
crying.
made a press release.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. That's true. They do make press releases when they do stuff like this. Like when Gab kicked off Christopher Cantwell, they did a little press release about it.
It's publicity.
I guess it is. And this is the Call to Freedom. We're going to talk a little bit more about cops and their wrongdoing, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. And maybe you want to have sex with prostitutes and then arrest them, or bust people for drugs and then sell the drugs on the side for a nice little bonus. If you've ever wanted to enjoy the power rush of being a cop without all the paperwork, then you should try the Thin Blue Line game, which can be found at thinbluelinegame.com. It's the only card game in the world that allows you to shoot someone over a broken taillight and then escape accountability with the magical phrase, I feared for my life. Typical cop stuff. Get it now at thinbluelinegame.com. Assault and battery is not included, but for a limited time, you can order your copies and use the coupon code CTF to have all shipping costs waived. So go get it. Again, that's thinbluelinegame.com. And speaking of cops, I'm still amazed that I haven't been banned again from Facebook for one of my most recent cop posts.
Uh-oh. What'd you post?
So
I haven't seen it yet.
It was brought to my attention that cops are doing the feeling cute challenge, as they call it, and are saying just horrifically immoral things. Like, I'm feeling cute, might lock down the whole unit later. I don't know. Feeling cute, might shoot your baby daddy later. I don't know. Feeling cute, might arrest your girlfriend for some drugs that aren't hers later on. Just openly and brazenly talking about how they, on a whim, will commit aggressions against people. So I posted my own selfie. I said, feeling cute, might shoot some cops later. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, I did see that.
Well, see, that's not a threat of violence. That's just the contemplation of violence. I think that technically doesn't violate the terms.
Okay, fair. I don't know if it does or not.
I think that's accurate because I read all the terms a couple of weeks, well, maybe a couple months ago, because I was going to do a write-up on them, and then I didn't. But I think that doesn't actually technically violate the terms because it's not a threat of violence. You're not advocating violence. You're contemplating violence, and that's different.
That is true. And I wasn't even contemplating violence, right? I was just calling attention to the fact that these cops
Right, yeah, I don't know you weren't really, but on its face, it's a contemplation.
For the stupid people out there who don't know what nuance is, I can see why they would think I was contemplating aggression. I expected significantly more than that. Jeff Wood got investigated by the FBI for saying something not even that bizarre on Facebook. He said something like, I fully expect to be shooting cops within my lifetime, which, okay, yeah, that may actually be worse than what I said.
Yeah, that's more of a plan.
So he got reported and visited by the FBI. I expected something along those lines, but as it happens, nothing happened.
Yet.
Haven't even been banned from Facebook again.
And I think that Facebook bans have more to do with who your followers / friends are than your actual content. Because if I just have, and I don't, but if I only have 500 people and they're all anarchists and they don't report me, I'm probably not going to get reported.
You could say whatever you want. There's a reason I keep my friends list trimmed down to the bare minimum.
Well, I don't. I'll accept a friend request from virtually anyone who is actually a real person.
Yeah, I pretty much accept anybody who's not a bot, but I also feel like I'm in a slightly better position to know, like, oh, here's the line, I'm going to stand on it, than somebody who isn't that obnoxious.
Well, like 90% of my personality involves pushing the line and crossing over it to see how far I can go before I get smacked down by the powers that be.
Yeah.
That's why I post things like that to Facebook, and that's why I do a topless show on Tuesday nights, even though that's technically not allowed. But we're going to go now to, I just had it in front of me, sorry, Tim, who is calling in from Maryland. Tim, what's on your mind?
Hey, I've just been listening to this show for a while, and I had maybe a short little story about how I was unfairly targeted and harassed by the police the other day, if, it fits well with the program.
Yeah, all right, let's have it. So what happened?
Okay, so it's about 10:30 at night, and I'm with my buddy Huncho, and we're driving home, a suburban area, very not really trafficy. So I'm doing the speed limit, and there's nothing wrong with my car. And then, we get a cop behind us, we get lit up, pulled over, and, I'm assuming something must have, maybe a taillight's out. Well, then I was ordered out of the car he had his gun drawn. I was being told, shouted at, screamed at. Me and my buddy were utterly confused.
I can imagine.
Comes to find out, it was a similar situation. Apparently our car was similar to one that was involved in like a robbery earlier. We have guns in our faces, just typical stuff, and that really, really shook me,
I'm sure it would. That's bound to be a traumatizing event.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, yeah.
So how did it play out? Obviously they didn't shoot you, or at least they didn't murder you. So how did it play out?
No.
So you were just driving home or driving around with one of your friends, and you got harassed by a pirate, a thug, a murderer, probably. Just playing the odds there. Who, because your vehicle resembled someone else's vehicle, decided to pull you over.
Yeah, and the thing about it afterwards was, we're in cuffs, we're sitting in the back of a vehicle, and they just say, they get us out, they uncuff us, they say, go home. And no sorry, no, we messed up, just go home, That there was no recognition of what they did, you know?
So they had you in handcuffs in the back of their vehicle.
For 30 minutes while they tried to identify the car, and it was utterly, ridiculous.
And because they didn't take you in, presumably they didn't have to do any paperwork.
No.
Substantiating your story.
No. Having a badge means not having to say you're sorry.
It does. Well, thank you so much for the story, Tim. Man, that's terrible. I've been pulled over quite a lot. Never had the police put a gun in my face. Although...
You're lucky.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Mississippi, where most people do just carry guns and things like that. But I was pulled over at one point by a state trooper, and he asked me for my insurance information. So I reached into my little console there to get it. And I remember, oh, crap, I have a loaded .38 sitting right there. So the state trooper sees it. So I slam it shut and throw my hands up. But, if I had been black, more than likely I would have been shot then and there.
Yeah.
Quite possibly, yeah.
I always also go out of my way to, narrate what I'm doing, even though the cop just told me to do it.
Yeah.
One time I was looking for my registration, and it was dark, because of course it was, because if it wasn't, I wouldn't have got pulled over. And I couldn't see, so I told the cop, I'm going to pull out my flashlight now, so I could, step by step, because it's if I don't, I'm probably going to get shot, so, yeah.
Well, as I understand it, they don't shoot nearly as many women as
yeah,
they
that's
do men.
true. Yeah, so, and I'm a white woman, so I'm a lot less likely to get shot, but it's still a good idea.
It is. Yeah, when you're dealing with a violent, armed psychopath who is issuing commands to you, playing a sort of lethal Simon Says, it's a good idea to be 100% clear by repeating the instructions back to them what they want you to do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because you just told me to go dig in this box, and then you're going to have a problem with me digging in this box.
Yeah.
So,
by definition, they don't like it when you go digging around in compartments. Yeah.
But they tell you to go get all these papers, and they have to be somewhere. I can't drive with my license and registration in my hand, and in some state, in every other state, insurance. That, it's not a good way to drive.
No. And I imagine they would probably pull you over for it.
Probably, yeah.
For distracted driving. I know they'll pull you over if you have a cell phone in your hand, even if it's just in your hand. It doesn't even have to be powered on, and they'll still pull you over.
Or maybe your registration looks like a cell phone to a cop.
Oh, yeah, that's true, too. Because they are pretty stupid. They've confused, cell phones for guns. They've confused, I can't think of any other examples, but I know they've shot people for holding cell phones, believing them to be guns. Keys is another.
Anything.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. Just basically, when you're confronted by a cop, throw your hands up and say, I'm sorry, please don't murder me. And then they're going to murder you anyway. And, of course, I'm not a fan of that. One of the most frustrating things about the guy who was shot in the hotel room, and there's just so much police murder of innocent people that it's hard to keep track of these people's names. But the one who, had the whole cross your legs, kneel down on the ground, and crawl toward me thing, I'm sorry, dude, you are just going to have to shoot me. I'm not crawling toward anyone. And how dare you issue a command like that? You vicious, bloody tyrant. That is the most dehumanizing, the most demeaning and insulting thing that you can demand somebody do, is crawl to you.
Yeah.
And that's what they were asking of this kid.
Wait, and then he was also getting conflicting information from the two different cops.
That's true.
So he couldn't comply.
But that's what the kings of the horrible Henry VIII's of the Middle Ages did in order to make people subservient to them. It was like, kneel and crawl to me. And then we have police here in the United States issuing exactly the same command. Screw that, dude. Yep. Maybe I'm too proud, but you're going to have to shoot me because I'm not getting on my knees for you, and I'm not crawling for you. I might get on my knees so that they can arrest me or something like that. But that's somewhat understandable. It's different from crawling to them at the very least. This is a call to freedom. We're going to talk about the death penalty, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. I'm your host, as always, Aria DeMezzo of Aria Uncensored, which will be on tomorrow night at 10 o'clock p.m. here on dlive.lrn.fm and twitch.lrn.fm. is a weekly show that I do, topless, by the way, for those who are interested in seeing some tranny booby. It's generally pretty entertaining, and tomorrow night I will be joined by Derek J. Freeman of Victimless Crime Spree, and also who will be on Free Talk Live tomorrow night. So definitely check out both of those things. It's going to be really awesome. And check out Victimless Crime Spree, which you can watch at victimlesscrimespree.com to find out all about how the cops like aggressing against peaceful people who are just going about their lives. And, of course, I'm joined in the studio by
Melanie
and Michael.
And we're gonna go now to Rev, who wants to yell at me. Basically, that's the sense I gathered from it. Rev, what's on your mind?
Yeah, so I'm not going to do this to the callers again because the other callers don't like me and whatever. Well, screw them, because I'm the best caller and I do the best voices, but that's not the point. I'm inebriated off liquor right now, too. That's not the point. I won't do this for a while. I just want to say I am still a big fan of the show and of some of libertarianism, and as a weird hybrid between a libertarian and a fascist monarchist, I get what a lot of you guys are saying. But I just want to ask you, Aria, and call you out. What you say groups don't exist, but you're always talking about the butthole police and the evil they do. So what's the difference between you and us racists?
Well, that's a good point. When I refer to the police, I'm referring to a collective, a fictitious group, a social construct of individuals who have chosen to put on that uniform and aggress against people. Now, is it true that there are some good cops? Probably.
Yeah, there might be a few left.
I would dispute that, but
but almost by definition, they have opted voluntarily to become enforcers of arbitrary and asinine laws in order to aggress against innocent people.
You know that expression, one bad apple spoils the bunch? Well, it did.
Well, and so the police is a group that you voluntarily join, whereas you don't join what race you want to be. You can't be like, well, I don't want to be black anymore. I quit, and I'm going to go get hired as an Asian now.
Well, the point he's making is more fundamental than that. The police as a group does not exist. You are correct to call me out on that. There is no such thing as the police. There are only law enforcement officers. There are only individuals who act in the capacity of law enforcement. So go ahead.
Sorry. You could equally see what the other girl said. Right, you can't choose to be black, but you're choosing to be a law officer. Well, we could look at Vietnam, and I'm sure if we did not have a voluntary police force or military as massive as it is, there'd be some kind of coercion used to make people into that regardless. But also...
Well, there was a draft in Vietnam.
What? Yes, exactly, because they didn't have enough voluntary people, so the state will use whatever resources or coercive force to go to people into that. So it's not a matter of, cops voluntarily...
Well, but as of now, that is the case. So cops are voluntary. If there was a world or a country where that was not the case, then my assessment would be different. But as it stands, cops are a thing that you voluntarily join.
Okay, fair enough. My issue with them...
I've never talked about shooting a firefighter.
Yeah.
Right. Because
most people like firefighters.
They work for the state, but if you have some stupid little funny mushrooms or a little green plant, they're not the buttholes that will put you in a cage like an animal. And now that's something we all have in common, right? Do you all think that cops are pieces of feces? Even the best, nicest, sweetest cop who doesn't want to enforce those laws, if he's compelled to enforce those laws, and whose superior will crack down on him, do you not agree that any cop is a piece of feces for putting another person who's not aggressive another person in a cage for having, quote, narcotics?
Yes, because it's a job that you choose. If we're talking about a drafted position, which is what you're describing, then there's a different assessment there, and you have to bring in lifeboat ethics and trolley problems and everything else. As long as this is a voluntary position, then I will describe them as the pure evil that they are.
Yeah, I mean, so their supervisor is cracking down on them. Okay, so quit and find a job where you don't have to aggress against people.
They'll be replaced.
The thing
about... They'll be replaced just like Nazis, SS Waffen, same thing.
That's fine, but that doesn't mean you have to do it. Like,
okay, great. I don't do it. Aria does it. Aria doesn't do it. Melanie does it. Mike, you see, it's stupid. You're okay. We agree that at a core, that right, ideologically, we have a problem with this. Melanie and I disagree in that she's talking about the voluntarism. I don't care if it's voluntary or not. I want to know real quick my other component to my personal problem with cops. Real quick.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, go for it.
Oh, no, it's your show. I'm not trying to derail it, but you spend 40 minutes talking, and you should be more aggressive. You should be like, I know you don't want to advocate shooting, but say that when a cop burns to death in a fire, it's funny. When their kids burn to death, the smell of their skin is sweet. That's what I believe.
It is not what I believe. I am appalled to think that anything I have ever said could be misconstrued as reveling in the burning of children's flesh, Rev.
It's a cop's kid. Who cares? It's an aggressive kid, right?
Because the kid is not guilty of the crimes.
It's a rape trader's kid.
No, a child is not guilty of the crimes of their parents.
The kid didn't be like, I want to be born of a cop. They were just there.
I don't.
I know. Well,
I don't believe. Okay. I believe an individual is responsible for their own actions. And
right. And that's why autistic freaking libertarianism, as nice as it is and as sensible and smart as you people are in many ways, is never going to ultimately go anywhere. Just like the Nazis or the commie scum, who are also political ideologues who tend to be well-educated or well-read, are also never going to go anywhere. Because people are too fat, stupid, and lazy and digitally programmed voluntarily to want to do anything about this. So when we're all demographically replaced, Aria and friends, who do you think is going to stand up against the butthole cops or the butthole Jews or whoever that are all colluding together? Who do you think? Nobody.
Well, okay, there's a lot for me to cover there real quick. And again, this is why I talk about the colonization of planets and moons and other solar systems. Because I recognize that most people are just not inclined to do anything about these problems. And that we're never going to persuade the masses of people who get their news from CNN and things like that. They're too indoctrinated. They love the state too much. They're too caught in the grips of Stockholm Syndrome. The best course of action for us is to propagate these ideas, make sure that they survive, and to just wait for 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now, when the technology exists for some group to get into a intergalactic spaceship or interstellar spaceship and find a planet somewhere where they can just take individuals who want to exist in a voluntary society. We can't do that here on Earth because the state has already claimed every single foot of land on this planet. If there was some island or something like that, that's part of the Free State Project's attempts, actually, is to bring those sorts of people into one place.
And when we do go get an island and they bomb us, so there's that too.
I'm sorry?
There have been a couple of people who have decided to either get an island or an artificial island and just live in international waters, and that is not put up with.
Right. Yeah. So even if you were able to succeed, because of the relative locality of the distances involved, the state would still be able to crack down on you easily.
Like those guys off the coast of Thailand last week.
Yeah, this would not be the case in regard to other planets and other solar systems. It would be eventually. But the voluntary society would have plenty of time, much like the American colonies were able to rebel against the British Empire, despite it being just tremendously more powerful than they were. And it was because the technology at the time did not make crossing those distances especially feasible. The same tendency will allow this future group to establish their society away from the states.
Well, at least you have some kind of forethought for the future. So look, you're a radio/internet show. You do a good job. I shouldn't be so hard on you. But you don't think that ANCAPs could buy up the planet or all those planets and do the same thing? It's not the state. The state is just a tool of it. It's who's running the state. This is what I've tried to impress on this.
Oh, we'll be back. We'll answer that question in just a moment, so don't go anywhere. This is The Call to Freedom. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom here on LRN.FM. You're invited to give us a call. That number is 603-283-6160. Again, that's 603-283-6160. Or if you want clearer quality, you can use the Discord call-in lines, which you can find at discord.lrn.fm. We also have substantially clearer quality there. I went over that. Sorry, I'm distracted. And you can actually join in the chat there, which is almost always ongoing about something, whether it's actually related to the show or not. The on-air room is usually buzzing with some sort of chatter. We're going now to Lucid, who is calling in from the United Kingdom. Lucid, you mentioned the police over there. What's on your mind?
Okay, so I just want to talk about mainly the gang violence in London and the all-time high of it and what the police are doing about it.
Is there a gang violence problem in London?
Yes, there's a huge gang violence problem. There's been about 13 stabbings in the last week, which is a lot. And the police are trying to combat it, but there's nothing they can do. And I want to talk about why I think the police should have guns.
All right, let's hear it.
All right, so basically, like I said, I live near London. There's lots of gang violence. I think maybe 1 in 10 people on the streets of London carry a knife, and most of them are young black teenagers who have been drawn into the violence and can't get out of it. It's kind of like in America how you know what I mean, the gang violence to kids start from an early age. And
LRN.FM.
A for effort. Again, dump button. I saw that coming when he mentioned gang violence in the United Kingdom, but I intended to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, well,
unsurprisingly, that went nowhere.
Worth a shot.
Because, I mean, that's a common talking point among the racists is that, oh, we're letting in all these refugees and they're bringing in all this violence and things like that. And it's long demonstrated to be just nonsense, right?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
But congratulations, you got out there to the 6 people or whatever watching on Twitch. You did not get out onto the airwaves. So, A for effort. Better luck next time.
Yeah, you lose.
Yeah. So he's not incorrect about London stabbings. There are quite a lot of them. I definitely don't agree that the police should have guns. I mean, especially not in a country where the average person cannot get guns. That, to me, is a recipe for problems. So, I mean, we have the same situation here in the United States, realistically, where our guns are about as effective as knives against the guns that are effective, the guns that the police have access to, like their Bearcats and things like that. We might as well be carrying knives when we're faced with Bearcats and tanks and landmine-resistant vehicles owned by sheriff's departments.
Yeah, they've really got the normal people outgunned and out-armored and out everything. What are they planning for?
Oppression, I guess. The ability to shoot at us without us being able to shoot back. Or without us being able to shoot back in any meaningful capacity, which does seem to be the case already.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of already at that point, and the thing that really bothers me though is I don't think the people will shoot back.
I think they will at some point, but
well, I thought they would at some point, but we've had all these points come and go.
Well, I mean, what points did you think we would start shooting back at?
The point where cops can just get away with literal murder on the streets?
Well, I mean, that was 100 plus years ago.
It was, but
I mean,
200 years ago, 200 years ago, we started a war because the British Empire effectively shot an unarmed civilian, and that was the final straw.
I think it was like 5 of them, but yeah.
Well, my history sucks. I just know that they shot somebody and we were like, hey, you're not allowed to do that. Contrast to today, where the same people have the same people who profess, just extreme loyalty to the Constitution and the principles of the United States and the right to carry arms and all of that have thin blue line flags on their freaking vehicles.
Yeah, it's total.
I always wonder, like, how much of that is cop repellent and how much of that is real. Maybe I'm just being too optimistic about people, but I'm always like, is that cop repellent?
I don't know.
No, it's not cop repellent. These so-called conservatives love cops. They love licking the boots. They love the taste of Shinola.
Look, if I thought it would get me out of being pulled over, I would put a blue line flag on my car. Absolutely.
Well, yeah,
it's
so
like
I mean, depending on where you are exactly. I mean, there's things you can put on your car that will serve. So
like an LRN.FM bumper sticker.
Well, maybe. Maybe.
It seems to help.
They will. I actually, we hadn't got pulled over. I need to go buy some new bumper stickers. I used to have a law school bumper sticker next to an anarchist bumper sticker, and anyone who drove my car never got pulled over. And I need to rebuy both of those things. But yeah, so I mean, there were people when I was in South Louisiana, there were like drug dealers who would drive around with sheriff's star stickers on the back of their car because it wouldn't keep them from getting pulled over completely because you're, due to your industry, you're a little bit suspicious looking at times, but it helped, which is why they did it.
Interesting.
They were not at all supporters because I've talked to them and they were not, but they knew what worked and they did it. I'm not saying that's going to work in every single town.
Right.
But...
Well, I wish I could pretend to be surprised, but we do know that cops exercise a lot of discretion and personal choice when it comes to who they pull over and who they don't. Because, you can sit out on the highway for 5 minutes and see 30 cars every 5 minutes that are breaking the law in some capacity, either by speeding, not using turn signals, or whatever. So which ones did the cops pull over? Because they are picking and choosing. They're not pulling over everybody. For one, they can't. So they have to pick which one they want to pull over. And they have their own biases and criteria that they use to make those determinations. And in a lot of the cases, especially in places like Memphis, Tennessee, it's going to be based more on skin color than anything else. Color of vehicle is also a big one, I hear, where red vehicles are more likely to be targeted.
Yeah. If you own a red Honda, you're probably going to get shot.
Yeah. Well, that's a bit egregious, I would hope. I would hope we can't yet say you're probably going to get shot. There's another spammer. But you certainly run the risk of possibly getting shot. And that sucks.
Well, your risk of getting shot is increased.
Yeah. Well, anytime, the more you interact with cops, I think that possibility approaches basically infinity or one, however you would like to phrase it, where
pretty much,
at some point you're going to trigger one of these thugs and they're going to murder you. Because that's what they do. That's what they're trained to do. Sure, they're peaceful and relative. I'm getting to that. When you talk to them on the streets, they're peaceful and relatively calm and polite and things like that. But it's just a switch for them. You say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, and in a second, they can have their gun out shooting at you.
If not you, then someone you know.
Yep. It's almost like some sort of psychological brainwash. And this is a Call to Freedom. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more discussion about police, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. I'd like to invite you to check us out on social media. You can find us on Facebook by using @Call to Freedom, on Twitter by using @CTF_LRN, and you can join our Discord, which you can find at discord.lrn.fm. Now we're gonna hedge our bets here and just go back to Rev, who isn't finished yelling at me, because apparently he seems to have the impression that these voluntarists, these anarcho-capitalists who migrate to this other place, to migrate to this other planet somewhere in the distant future, will somehow have to contend with a local state. Am I getting that correct?
Wait.
First of all, when you say hedge your bets, you know I'm one of the most interesting freaking things that calls this show, whether you like it or not. What are you left with? Stupid butthole Twitch trolls? That last English guy was good, but who just say N-I-G all the time. So don't insult me like I'm some 2-bit crumb bum caller.
No,
girl,
when I say hedge, okay, chill out. I realize you're drunk. But when I said hedge our bets, what I meant there was that I knew you're a safe call, right?
Oh, thanks. Okay.
Right. You're not going to get out there shouting these slurs. You're not going to call in to tell me I'm not a woman, right? You may think that. I don't care if you think that or not, but you're not going to call in just to say it. Well, we have at least one person waiting on hold who more than likely wants to do exactly that. Because that seems to be what they're focusing on at the moment. So, back to the subject at hand. Yeah. Back to the subject at hand.
Yeah, I have a better subject for you, but you're this planetary movement. First of all, if you want to laugh at like Cantwell's idea of the quote Nazis or white nationalists or whoever eventually moving to like covertly and taking over a small government area and so forth without advertising swastikas, you can never laugh at them again, girl, because you have said about putting libertarians and anarchists on different planets. And if you don't think the hook noses are going to own the planets just like they've owned the tranny drugs and the medical marijuana and all this garbage they're pushing, think again. You guys are good people, and I'll shut up when you want me to, but you're good people, but you are so freaking autistic, and you piss me off. All of you, honestly, not just because I'm drunk. You know why? Because you're so smart, and you should know better. You just said, oh, immigrants don't cause...
LRN.FM.
Oh, that was not what I heard.
No, he said immigrants.
Okay. Sorry. I did not hear immigrants, Rev. Give a call back. You know the number. Sorry about that. I misheard you. That was my fault. I assume that's you now, but I actually can't do this while on the air to find out. Sorry about that. I thought you said something else. My drop and dump fingers are a bit antsy. My trigger fingers, as they say.
Yeah, it happens when we've got every call is a troll. So.
Yeah.
What is that state that makes us have to drop you if we hear something wrong?
What?
It's the state that makes us have to drop you if we hear something wrong.
That's true. Well, it's also Twitch.
If we were on our own planet, we could just keep you on.
Yeah.
That's true. And well, we would still have to contend with Twitch and DLive's content filters. Yeah, sorry, Rev. You will have to call back. It looks like you will have to use the Discord call-in line. I know how much you hate Discord, but it looks like you will have to do that. That's discord.lrn.fm. But yeah, if you have 5,000 people who are voluntarists who go to a distant planet where there is no sentient life, and we can get into a discussion about what constitutes sentient life and whether or not humans would be able to recognize it in the first place, because I don't think we would, because we don't look at dolphins and think, oh, well, these are clearly intelligent creatures. To us, they're just animals. To most people, they're just animals.
I think a lot of people do make that distinction. Now, if there's some other, like, non-carbon-based life form that operates completely differently, I think we would miss it, and that would be horrible.
Well, we probably couldn't survive in the same environment that a non-carbon-based life form was capable of surviving in. Like on Titan, where it rains methane and things like that, there's probably silicon-based life.
Yeah, we'd have a lot of trouble living
Right, but that
there.
doesn't also mean that we wouldn't terraform. So any other planet we found, we'd probably have to terraform it to some extent.
Yeah, to some extent, I think. Yeah, well, I don't know. You know, there are Earth-like planets out there that are, one would assume, would end up following a... It's a fascinating topic to think about.
But then if
really
they were,
is.
would they not have evolved similar life, and then we can't just take that planet?
Well, I don't know. Well, sentience isn't like a goal of evolution. It just happened to evolve here on Earth because we had that niche that we filled. So it's not necessarily true that sentient life was going to evolve, and it didn't evolve here for 4.5 billion years. There was no sentient life whatsoever. There is now, or at least what we believe to be sentient. I believe myself to be sentient. Mm-hmm. But, so yeah, there may not be sentient life on these distant planets. There may not be trees. There may not be things that we even recognize as life, because there's no reason that their evolution would have gone down the paths that ours did. Like, the only reason we have plants now is because of these cyanobacteria in the early atmosphere that found an abundance of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which they consumed and converted into hydrogen, which allowed for the rise of animals. So in the very early days of our planet's history, evolution sort of took that branching pathway between plant and animal. But if their atmosphere doesn't have those conditions, why would they have plants 3 billion years later?
That's a good question. It probably never would happen.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't have plants. They would certainly have something, right? Because that's just the way that evolution and life are.
Some kind of microscopic organism.
Well, I mean, it may have evolved into some sort of complicated life. I don't know that it wouldn't, but it certainly wouldn't resemble an oak tree, I don't think, or, a cat.
Most likely not.
And that's why I don't think that we would actually recognize most other planets' life as being life once we find it.
Well, yeah, if it was even a little bit different, depending on what you define as a little bit, I don't think we would recognize it.
But colonization of other planets, I've been criticized in the past for talking about that because it's just assumed that we're going to go there and just annihilate this other life form that we find there. And that may or may not be the case.
Yeah, the other life form might annihilate us.
Yeah, that's true too. But it ultimately comes down to whether or not it's sentient. And of course, I do advocate that the non-aggression principle should apply to all organisms, not simply humans.
Well, all organisms are all sentient or sapient organisms.
Well, see, that's where you get down a rabbit hole that there's really no good answer to. Because to live requires destroying other living things. Even if you're a vegan, you're destroying other living things to sustain your own existence.
And have you ever heard a carrot scream?
Neither has anyone else.
Awkward silence ensues. So, I mean, yeah, but why shouldn't we give the carrot the same consideration that we give the cow?
Because because at that point, and I don't think we should, and my standards are a little bit higher, I would require sapience, which gets confusing because most sci-fi shows refer to sapience as sentience.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of superimposing our own experience onto other things that, while are living, are really more like inanimate objects than they are like full human beings. You're not harming a carrot by eating it, because a carrot has no experiences. So you can't cause it to have a bad one because it doesn't have any. Like, it has no preference.
Perhaps you simply don't recognize the brain in the carrot. Perhaps it has a brain, but it's just so foreign to us because it's a plant, not an animal, that when we see it, we go, okay, well, this isn't something that I identify as a central nervous system and a functioning brain, so therefore it cannot be sentient. Much in the same way that we'll probably do with extraterrestrial life 1,500 years from now.
That seems more likely with things that are just completely different, non-carbon based, just completely different types of life forms. There's no reason to believe that with the carrot.
I agree, to be clear. I do not think carrots are sentient or sapient.
I don't either.
I don't like carrots anyway. This is the Call to Freedom. We'll be back in a moment.
I just like messing with the vegans.
Welcome back to the Call to Freedom. I'd like to remind you that our podcasts have moved. They are no longer being uploaded to Spreaker. Instead, you can find them at Podbean at calltofreedomlive.podbean.com. You can also find them on Spotify, Google Play Music, and iTunes. We are finally uploading episodes to iTunes, to the iTunes store. We've been having listeners on Apple and stuff like that anyway, but apparently if you're an Apple user, just being on iTunes makes us a lot easier to find. And already it does seem to be effective. I mean, we're not like to the point where 50% of our listeners are using iTunes or anything like that.
No, not yet.
But there was a noticeable number, not enough to make its way into the percentage stats. Because, I mean, really, the show's doing pretty well lately. So, cool on that. Being on iTunes will only help, so we'll see. And, so go check that out. That's calltofreedomlive.podbean.com. And you can find the full archive, not the full archive. I don't think it even exists any longer. But you can find an archive going back to when this particular incarnation of the show kicked off mid-February. So go check that out. Again, that's cultofreedomlive.podbean.com. And, okay, I have to stop watching the chat. It's just so retarded.
Oh, it's not good then. Or is it good?
It's good. And if you're a troll at heart like I am, it's good. Obviously, something has to be done about it. Ian is working frantically to kill these people who just keep creating new accounts in order to make stupid usernames. We're going to go back now to Rev, who we were having a conversation with a moment ago before we got interrupted, before I hung up on him, and I do apologize for that. I misheard you.
Yeah, at first I was just confused, and I'm like, what? And then I thought, thank you, Ian. He knew I said immigrants, not N-I-G-G. I won't spell the rest.
Yeah, there is absolutely no reason to say what I thought you said. So
it's already there when you have a... Fine. Well, yes, Mom. Go ahead.
So, what did you call in to discuss specifically? Because
so one more. Okay, sorry. So one more time, not to beat you all too much over the head, but I have an article right here that I posted, and there are many articles. But to do it quickly, right here. Let me put it on speaker just a second because I don't want to talk out of my rear end. All right. So let's look at this. BBC News, which is a pretty leftist publication, right? Sweden rapes most convicted attackers foreign-born. This is according to SVT, which is a high-ranking Swedish Spreaker television/multimedia company, right? And they reference court cases. There are numerous things. The fires in Gothenburg that low-IQ Muslim immigrant scum largely started. Rineki, I think that's how you pronounce that. Numerous no-go zones. Reports of these a-holes raping women, Rotherham, sex grooming, and butthole police doing nothing. So I ask you, in spite of all that evidence, what do you think? Do you still think immigrants don't cause crime?
I think two things. First of all, I would point out that the sources that you're citing are routinely called fake news by people who say exactly the opposite. And, of course...
by delusional leftists. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Delusional leftists. Even the TV station that's leftist and BBC that's leftist is reporting. Okay, yeah.
So
all right.
I am not in Sweden. So from my point of view, what I'm seeing is people on the left and people on the right, each saying things about the other, and both of them calling the other side fake news. And what you're effectively asking me to do is pick a side, and I'm going, it's got nothing to do with me.
I'm asking you to realize that there's statistical data here. I'm sure there's statistical data about some white pieces of garbage that commit rape and do terrible things to people, too. I'm not denying that. However, why are we bringing in these low-IQ, non-backwards compatible Sharia fundamentalist scum into certain societies at the behest of hook noses because open borders for decoy but not for we, like Netanyahu and all these scum say on the left and right? How is our society better with these scum here, with the 40% in crime? It's happening. The left even admits that. I wonder who's doing it. I guess the evil, straight, white cis man just got all violent suddenly, huh, Aria? So where do you draw your conclusions there?
Society isn't a real thing. It cannot be made better or worse. Only individuals within that society can have their lives harmed, helped, or hindered.
Fine, even if you acknowledge that, what are you saying then about from the 90s, the 40% crime increase, no-go zones, terrorist attacks? Are you denying that terrorist attacks like in Madrid a few years ago and the truck attacks and the Ariana Grande concert attacks were not claimed by ISIS and Sharia supporters? What do you think about that? You think it's a left-right issue?
I think it's not my problem to solve.
Oh, okay, good. So when you don't care because it's not
I didn't say I don't care.
Christian...
I didn't say I don't care. But I'm not a tyrant. I'm not omnipotent. I'm not omniscient. There are thousands. There's limitless variables to this situation. For me to have the audacity to say, okay, well, you've got all of these things going on, but I'm going to set up the system that is totally going to solve all of these problems is lunacy. I'm just some random person. People will have to sort out their problems themselves.
Okay, but the point is you acknowledge when police, who are largely buttholes, which I agree with, I guess I'd be closer to an anarcho-nationalist if I wasn't such a statist myself out of necessity.
What? Hold on, anarcho-nationalism is a thing. We talked about that before. Yeah. We ended up going.
I know.
That's a confused thing.
No, it's not a confused thing. You're a confused thing. You guys are the confused thing. No, and I like you guys. I'm not just trying to insult you.
Anarcho-nationalism I was calling.
No, I know, but that's not confused necessarily, ma'am. So wait, Aria Aria, I want to hear from Melanie and Michael, since you're co-hosting, about what I just showed you guys. I'll agree that the left and the right can sometimes manipulate certain statistics or try to, but the reality is there are way more Muslims now. They are demonstrably lower IQ, okay? They stone each other in these countries, and now they're here and crime has gone up. What's the correlation? Go ahead.
Okay, so a correlation for a specific country that I haven't researched, I can't speak on, but I will say, yes, there are pragmatic concerns with immigration, or at least with mass immigration. If somebody is moving from country A to country B that better reflects themselves, then that's probably a good thing. If somebody is moving from country A to country B, which is an entirely different culture than they want to live in, that is a bad thing. Yes, there are practical concerns with mass immigration, and there are practical concerns with mixing people from multiple cultures where the cultures are incompatible.
Thank you. That's very smart. Yeah, no, right, okay. And I know it's hard to admit that because of the social leftism, and Ian's a good guy, but even you guys got to be careful with advertisers. You start saying something that sounds close to Nazis, I can say it, but if you criticize the Zionists, okay, Michael, what's your theory then? You had said earlier that immigrants do not cause crime, and I've just given you some demonstrable evidence that in some cases, at least, they do. So what are your thoughts?
Well, in some cases, other people cause crime, but my thought is the states in Europe are giving away free stuff, and people came to claim the free stuff. There you go.
Right. Okay, that's a problem too. But immigrants are causing crime. Aria, one more thing. You said that I've never been to Sweden, therefore this is an infantile argument. I get it that if you've been to Mississippi or Florida,
I didn't say I've never been to Sweden. I said I'm not in Sweden.
Okay,
and then I built on that by pointing out that I've never even been there. But no, I am not Swedish. I have never been to Sweden. I have no intention of going to Sweden. It sounds like a problem that the individuals that comprise the Swedish culture should sort out and solve themselves.
Okay, it's just always interesting whenever it's cops that are a-holes doing stuff, or whenever it's a Christian white man, like Mike Pence stressing conversion therapy, which I also think is a butthole thing to do. You're all over that and Christianity and this and that, but when it's a Muslim butthole or a Jew butthole or whatever, then, it's the individual. Aria is very tolerant towards that.
I don't agree. I pick and choose my fights. There's really no particular reason for me to target Muslim terrorism or things like that, because that's what the media goes to, right? If a Muslim commits an act of terrorism, it's going to be broadcast on every major news site. I don't have to discuss it because other people are discussing it. Okay, maybe not CNN, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's generally,
on the right, you're right.
It's generally attacked in the mainstream.
But if you're a Christian and you do it, it's only going to be a niche audience that discusses it.
You guys do a pretty good job of discussing the issues, and I'll get off the phone. I think I've given enough of a thing, especially drunk. But I appreciate that in light of new information, you all seem to have, I don't want to say changed your opinions, but you've at least actualized the information more. So I'll give you that. Just don't pick and choose. Don't pick and choose. Hasta luego. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the call, Rev. That was always...
You seem to have predeterminations of what we think for some reason.
Yeah, what does he drink?
Vodka.
Is it alcohol?
Vodka today, apparently. This is the Call to Freedom. We'll be back in a moment with more discussion, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom. I'm your host, as always, Aria, and I'm joined in the studio by
Melanie
and Michael.
And we've been talking about police brutality and the... Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Oh, well. And the tendency of cops to shoot first and ask questions later. But they're not the only ones who shoot first and ask questions later, evidently. Michael, you brought in a story regarding active shooter drills, which is something that we've talked about several times in the past about the traumatic experience that it must be for a child.
I think we were talking about that last week when or possibly the week before when we found out they did an active shooter drill in Indiana, and they took the teachers and shot them in the back of the head execution style with pellet guns.
Yeah, in front of children. Yeah. That's certainly not something that I would want my child to experience.
No, and this is and my point back then was that this is not doing kids any good. It's just traumatizing them for no reason.
It is. And they were upfront about that when they attempted to pass the law in Indiana that made it okay to do this sort of thing. Was it? They were like, we want to make sure that these emotions are real. The problem with that is when you have those real emotions, we call those emotions fear and terror.
You're terrorizing the kids for the purpose of terrorizing the kids.
So you got these 5-6-year-old kids sitting in this classroom cowering in real emotion, believing this drill to be a real thing, not a drill. And they're experiencing these emotions legitimately. Those emotions are going to leave scars, whether the event turns out to be a state-orchestrated hoax or not.
Congratulations, you have now messed up millions of kids to protect them against the remote possibility of getting shot by an active shooter.
So coming to us from NBC News, Heidi Lee Pottinger's 5-year-old son was at a football game last fall with his father when, following a touchdown, celebratory fireworks rocketed into the sky. Panicked by the popping sounds, the little boy turned to his dad. "Active shooter," he cried, tears in his eyes. Pottinger's son is one of millions of school children in America who have done active shooter and lockdown drills. Now, that sounds a lot like PTSD, does it not?
It is.
It sounds like it to me.
To hear fireworks going off and automatically, it's a shooter, duck and cover.
That's what Vietnam vets did when they came back. They couldn't listen to fireworks. They thought they were under attack.
The exercises, a legacy of the Columbine High School rampage, are intended to prepare teachers and students for the rare threat of a gunman opening fire in their school. And that's interesting that this is coming to us from NBC News, considering they're calling these rare threats. That's not the narrative I would expect NBC to make. So Pottinger's son started doing the drills at his private nursery through 8th grade school when he was just 3 years old.
That's, oh my God, that's too early to start abusing your kids.
Well, when's the right age to start abusing your kids?
There isn't one.
I would say that age is irrelevant, and one probably should not be shooting kids, terrorizing kids or abusing kids.
You shouldn't.
During the drills, the Tucson, Arizona youngster would quietly crouch with his classmates and teachers behind furniture, rehearsing what to do if a real shooter were to burst in. The drills affected him deeply, as one might have guessed. At home, he bit his nails and did pretend lockdowns while he was playing. Eventually, he refused to go anywhere alone, even to his room or a bathroom at home. So they terrorized the freaking crap out of this kid.
He couldn't even go to the bathroom by himself anymore.
And he's probably not alone. I mean, when you have a you have a 4-year-old kid playing in their room and they suddenly go, "Lockdown, active shooter," and start hiding under the bed, that's your cue that you need to get your kid out of this school and have a chat with them.
Out of this whole system.
You're the only one here with kids.
Well, yeah. I mean, so I don't know how, what to add to don't terrorize kids.
What seems
obvious things you have to say out loud, I guess. You shouldn't be sending your kids to public school anyway. And I know people have excuses for that, but I don't care. And then especially if you know for a fact they're being abused specifically to the point where your 5-year-old has combat PTSD.
Yeah, I mean,
leave. I mean, I don't know how else to break that down.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it is hard to comment on other than saying, you know what, we probably shouldn't be traumatizing kids. I mean, that's pretty much the extent of it.
And it's not like this is the reality of life for these kids. They live. I mean, they live in the suburbs in most cases where they have extra resources to be thrown at stupid stuff like this. Like, it's not like a reality they actually have to prepare for. You're just terrorizing people for the sake of terrorizing people.
I mean, they don't do this kind of stuff for fire drills. They just pull the fire alarm and everyone kind of walks out of the building, and then they know what to do.
No, they have unannounced fire drills.
That's essentially the point behind the active shooter drill. It's just that you do different things when there's an active shooter than you do if there's a fire, right?
Well, you're right. So my point is, you don't have to traumatize kids for an active shooter drill.
Most of the time, the instructions are completely ridiculous anyway. I mean, I've got instructions at work and at school, at colleges, of what to do in that kind of situation, and it's like laughable. It's like one of them was like, if someone is, shooting at you, throw a stapler at them.
What?
I'm like,
yeah.
Go to hell. No, I'm not doing it.
No, I'm shooting back.
I'm going to throw a bullet at them at high speed velocities.
Like, either I have a weapon you don't know about, or I don't. And if I don't, I just, no, I'm leaving or hiding, or no, I'm.
I mean, it's alarming that the nuclear drills of the 60s, 50s, and 70s
even the 80s
were more honest than the active shooter drills. Because, I mean, then it was like, okay, all you can really do is duck under your desk and kind of hope for the best.
Which is not going to accomplish anything.
No, but neither is throwing a stapler at an active shooter.
The duck and cover drills weren't really that traumatic either.
I tend to think they probably were.
I disagree.
I went through them.
On talking to people. Okay. Because I've talked to other people who have gone through them, and they were like...
Well, people handle trauma differently. Not every 3-year-old is scared to go to the bathroom by themselves because of active shooter drills,
True.
I mean, some 6, 7-year-olds are totally fine after having gone through active shooter drills. That doesn't mean the experience itself isn't traumatic. It just means they're more well-adjusted.
They were better able to handle the trauma. Yeah. But it was still trauma.
Or they're handling it some other way, or internalizing it in a weird way, or becoming a psychopath, or whatever it is they're doing. Some people are just going to walk away from this and be fine, but I don't think most people are.
Becoming socialists, not having sex. I mean, this goes all through society.
So Lauren, the game freak, who's been watching us for quite a while on Twitch, has asked about rare school shootings in the United States. And I guess, rare is a relative term, right?
Right.
I guess compared to somewhere like the United Kingdom, where there are, as I understand it, no school shootings.
They have stabbings instead.
It's like, how do you look at this and say that it's rare? It's like, well, it's relatively rare.
Yeah, we have 350 million people here, like 1 million schools. There's going to be something that happens at one of them every once in a while.
And we actually went through the data here on the Call to Freedom about a year ago when this was first released, when some study was first released, talking about school shootings and things like that. What they were ultimately doing was taking any incidents of gun activity that was within, I think it was 100 yards of a school, and citing that as a school shooting. Where, like, if somebody at a gas station near a school shot at a robber, it was going to be put down as a school shooting.
If the cops shot at a robber a block away from the school, it was a school shooting.
They had classified a suicide as a school shooting.
That's right. They did do that as well.
Like, the numbers are just wrong.
Yeah, the stats were just extremely overhyped.
The stats are definitely being used to mislead people about how common these are, but that's not to say there aren't school shootings, and depending on your perspective, one is probably hard to characterize as rare, considering you would prefer there to be none. Well, this is the Call to Freedom. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get back to these traumatizing kids, people, here in just a moment. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom, and you're invited to give us a call at 603-283-6160. Again, that's 603-283-6160. Or you can use the Discord call-in lines, which you can find at discord.lrn.fm to join in on the conversation there and to get much clearer quality when you call in. The difference is actually pretty staggering. So definitely join that and join in on the chat there, which is now talking about the absolution of government and the Beltway and other nonsense that isn't even remotely related to what we've been talking about here on the show. So we've been talking actually about active shooter drills and the responses that they are generating from people who are finding that their kids are traumatized by these events. Like here, we're talking about this 5-year-old child, or he was 5 years old when all of this came to a head. The active shooter drills actually began when he was 3 years old. Apparently, he would say, "The lockdown is going to get me," which of course caught his parents very much off guard, to which they said, "This is his childhood and it should be carefree," and it's not. Yeah, and not that I agree, but this is, an easily countered point by the left and the gun control advocates saying it's not carefree because the threat of a school shooter is real, and we need to therefore get rid of guns so he can go back to having a carefree childhood without that threat hanging over his head.
It would just be something different. It's not the guns. That's what people don't seem to get. The problem with school shootings is not the guns. That's just the tool that the disturbed people use to
I'm not
cause
so
violence.
sure. I'm looking it up right now. I'm not seeing a lot of school stabbings in the United Kingdom. There are some.
Yeah, but per capita, the United Kingdom's a lot smaller.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Now, we'd have to crunch the numbers, and I don't think we have time to do that right on the air.
Well, I have no desire to do it one way or another because I don't really care that much.
But the problem is that there are kids that are disturbed enough to think that getting a gun and going and shooting people is the answer to whatever their problem is. And the way they got that way in the first place is because the government school system did it to them.
I don't know if I would agree that these people became shooters because of the school system. I think it's more of an overarching social and cultural issue that encourages violence against other people.
I've never seen a homeschooler shoot up a school.
Well, they don't have access to a school. Like most people go through public school, and most people don't commit mass murder. So I don't think you can have a real strong correlation there.
Most people didn't commit mass murder when everybody brought their guns to school either.
Right, so I'm obviously not saying it's the gun's fault. I didn't say anything remotely like that, but you can blame a lot of things on the state and on the schools. I don't think you can blame this. You can blame them for giving them access to a large population of defenseless people, but I don't think you can blame them for that inclination because most people go through public schools. Most people don't try to commit mass murder.
Yeah, well, a lot of them do try to commit suicide.
Yeah, so that's a separate issue.
I'm not
saying public schools are good. If I could abolish one government agency, it would be the DOE.
Yeah.
But
government
that doesn't
schools
mean
where I'd
every
start.
single bad thing is caused by them.
No, at least in
entirely.
regard to school shootings and the tendency of people to prefer violence as a solution to their problems when other people are involved, I would say the blame primarily rests with the parents who, instead of treating their children as though they have rights, resort to hitting them and spanking them and other methods that are just literally one person using violence to bend another person to their will.
Yeah, you're right. It does have that does happen.
And then those people ended up becoming adults, and they became school administrators and things like that, and they carried on the same policies. They became part of the state apparatus, so to speak, which then just sort of reinforced itself by teaching children who had been taught by their parents that violence is the solution when people do things that you don't like. So fast forward 40 or 50 years after this system, and you have people who are like, all right, well, they want violence. I'm going to give them violence.
Yeah, so if I think that most mass murderers are that way because of something about themselves, not because of the environment. I mean, maybe there's some psychologists who'll prove me wrong on that, but I don't.
Well, it's ultimately a
Because if it was
nature
caused
versus
by that,
nurture
then
argument.
But if it was caused by that, then most people would do it, or at least try to do it.
Well, it's definitely. I don't mean to suggest that it's all nurture, right? Obviously, one has to have some sort of inclination toward violence in the first place to be willing to engage in that sort of activity. So, but I mean, ultimately it is a question of nature versus nurture, whether these violent tendencies are already there because of some psychological flaw or physiological defect, or however we wish to phrase it, that lead them predisposed toward violence, or whether it's actually imposed into them by the state and by, parents beating them or whatever.
Yeah, so if we had a decent society, I think that things like this would probably happen a lot less often. But so then you're still saying there's a small amount of people, or I shouldn't say you're still saying, but then that would still mean that there's a small amount of people who, when put in this environment, react wildly differently than everyone else who doesn't commit mass murder.
Yes.
And so that's still more
that
of
is
a
how
problem.
I would say it.
That's still more of a problem with that person than it is with society. Has its problems. I'm not a fan of abusive parents or public schools, which most parents are abusive, but so either system, and you can blame them for a lot of things. I don't know that you can blame public schools for mass murder.
I don't know how much blame I really want to put on the 14-year-old goth kid who's been bullied his entire life, first by his parents, then by the school administrators, and then by other kids, who then goes on to shoot up the school. I don't know how much of that blame I really want to put on him, because, obviously, there was some seed already in his head that all of this violence used against him caused to grow. I would definitely put a lot of blame on the parents because, A, if you have an unstable child, they shouldn't have access to firearms. And B, so kind of everybody goes through the same public school system, more or less, in a general area. Everybody doesn't go through the same parents, so there's more variety there. And so it might be that, okay, the most abusive parents turn out school shooters, or parents in a particular type of abuse turn out school shooters. That could be the case. I don't have good data on that. Nor do I. And in fact, my personal experience would suggest that the opposite is true, and that children who had abusive parents and neglectful parents ended up being the types to go on to become the goth kids who valued love over hate, and who would condemn a school shooting more loudly than your average kid.
Sounds about right.
I don't...
But, I don't know.
Because, we all wore black and Marilyn Manson shirts and things like that, but none of us would ever have shot up a school. But, the kids who shot up Columbine did love them some Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
So, maybe it's just that we can't really make any sort of generalities about when someone's psychology breaks and they go on to commit some unfathomable act. This is the Call to Freedom. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom, and we've been talking about school shooters and the relative commonality of them versus, just the number of people who attend the public school system largely against their will, especially as they get older, and who end up graduating just fine without ever being shot at. Although increasingly so, it's not true to say that they graduated without ever being traumatized, because these active shooter drills are out there traumatizing kids to the extent that you have 5-year-olds who stop their play in their bedrooms to play lockdown for all intents and purposes.
This is scary stuff.
Yeah, that's so disturbing. Now, I don't know what kind of parent I would be. I don't have kids. I don't want kids. I'm never going to have kids. But I like to think that if I was aware that my child was in their bedroom playing, and suddenly they go, lockdown time, and they start hiding under the beds in preparation of a imaginary active shooter, I would be more than a little concerned.
I'd be a lot concerned.
Yeah, I would be like, come here, kid. Here is a handgun. Next time somebody says active shooter, you point this in the direction that they're pointing, and you shoot the shooter. And then, of course, I would go through the trouble of actually training them to use a gun and all of that. I would just be like, hey, here's a loaded 38, 5-year-old kid. Good luck. But, I mean, that ideally would be the solution. I imagine most 5-year-olds can handle it 38. I don't know that I would want them to, I don't know that, they have the maturity.
You might want to start them on something a little smaller.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to give the average 5-year-old a gun anyway, to be clear. But I'm sort of operating under the assumption here that whatever godless event happened that caused me to have a child would produce a child that was not your average child. I think that's probably a safe assumption. So I think it would probably be a little more mature than the average 5-year-old child.
Yeah,
but I still
think
wouldn't just hand my 5-year-old a gun and be like, here, let's go to the shooting range. Oh, try not to shoot me in the face.
Yeah, you gotta learn respect for these things.
Yeah, starting with something like a BB gun would probably be ideal at that age.
Well, that's what I started with.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind giving my 5-year-old a BB gun. I mean, worst case scenario is that they shoot themselves in the eye. I don't think there's any way to shoot yourself and kill yourself with a BB gun.
You got to try really, really hard.
Is it possible? Because they don't penetrate.
People have done that to other people. You got to be really trying, though. And they got to be, immobilized, basically.
Okay. So they got to be kind of half dead anyway.
Because you can shoot somebody at a certain angle in their throat, or down their throat and kill them that way. But typically, you cannot kill somebody with a BB gun.
It's even hard to kill a bird with a BB gun. You have to hit them just right.
Yeah. So in most cases, then I would say that by the age of 5, the average American child should have had a BB gun in their ownership.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's also true of Lego. So you can't just take away everything that has a slight possibility of danger. So
yeah, and prior to that, I guess you could start with some sort of other air rifle that shoots some sort of styrofoam pellet or something like that to get them used to the idea that, hey, when you pull this trigger and shoot someone, you cause them pain. Then you escalate that to the BB gun, and it means more pain. And then once they fully understand that and the implications of it, you can upgrade them to something like a 22.
Mm-hmm.
Probably at the age of 9 or 10 or something like that. Probably not at the age of 5.
Yeah, I don't think there's a 5-year-old on this planet that I would hand a gun to.
I don't know enough 5-year-olds to make that statement.
I've met
if I had had a gun when I was 5 years old, I would be significantly less traumatized today than I am.
Yeah, most likely.
Okay, that's fair, but yeah, so...
But I'm an unusual case. And I recognize that the average 5-year-old probably should not have an actual gun. Yeah. That's probably not going to help the school shooting situation. Because, I mean, to them, it's probably going to come across as a toy, and that would be what you would have to stress to them, is that this is not a toy.
And if you don't have so many kids under the supervision of only one adult to where they can't protect them adequately, then you kind of don't have that problem and you can just arm the adults and it doesn't matter.
That's true, too. I'm not sure that, that would be preferable for kindergarten and first grade, probably up to 3rd grade, to just arm the teachers and let them deal with the school shootings. I certainly don't want a class full of, how awesome would that be, though, for a school shooter to burst into a first grade classroom and have everybody in that first grade class just whip out guns and just blow his head off?
That sounds like a scene that should be in South Park or something.
It does.
But yeah, so, but my point there would be, not that... So there's an age, and it's going to differ by child when they should have a gun, and it's not... I would be surprised to come across a 5-year-old ever that it's 5, but if, one adult can't have... I can't have... It is not physically possible for me to produce 20 5-year-olds. So you're kind of creating...
Well, if you had, octuplets 3 years in a row, you could.
They still wouldn't be 5. That's rare. Not only is it rare, they don't usually survive, all of them. But it still wouldn't be physically possible for me to have 20 different 5-year-olds. You're kind of creating a situation
I don't know what the number for that would be.
That shouldn't exist.
It's certainly a bit more than an octuplet.
Yes, so if you're taking care of your own kids instead of giving them to the state, you can pretty much adequately protect all of the kids that you have. You can't adequately protect all of the kids in a given jurisdiction of a given age group, or 1 to 2 year age range.
Well, I think in the cases of schools, and I'm certainly no advocate of schools. In fact, I hate schools. I mean, even private schools. Screw them. You will learn a lot more if you want to.
Private schools follow the same model, so I don't really consider them different.
I mean, homeschooling. Then I'm not a fan of any of it. I think if a child wants to learn, they're going to do that of their own accord, and I don't think you can have this scheduled time each day or each week or these set allotments of how much they have to learn or anything like that. So I'm not a fan of this whole educating people thing in the first place. It's way more involved than I care to get into right now. But the public school systems or the private schools, they do have the advantage in that there's only one entry point to the classroom. So they don't necessarily have to...
That's not always true.
It's more often than not true. They don't normally have 2 doors into a classroom.
Until I got pulled out, all of my classrooms had 2 doors, but maybe that was odd.
Yeah, that was odd. I've seen that maybe once or twice.
So a lot of these teachers only have the one entry point, and that changes what they have to do. They don't have to guard 30 kids individually. They just have to keep an eye on this one entry point. So see, they're not trying to be a bodyguard for 30 kids as much as they are being a bodyguard for 1 door, which is a substantially easier thing to do.
And that's fair, assuming you're in the classroom, which you're not all the time. But yeah, that's fair.
Well, I mean, yeah, if a teacher's not in the classroom, then it's not going to matter how many kids are there.
At some point, you're taking 30 kids to the cafeteria or 30 kids to recess or to wherever.
Yeah.
You're usually in the classroom, I guess, though.
Well, I mean, realistically, anything could happen at any time, right? Like, they could be walking down the hallway in between classes where there are no teachers out and about, and a school shooting happens then. It could happen by a school shooting bursting into the classroom through the one entryway, and the teacher having an arm to deal with that, or the teacher being out, or in the office making copies, or whatever. Anything could happen at any time. I'm certainly not making the case that, if we just had one ultra-vigilant adult around these kids at all times, then we could eliminate school shootings. Because I don't think that's a quest we should be trying to do anything about in the first place. To me, it's a societal issue. I mean, we have violent people, and we are doing something that is causing them to act on those violent impulses, which is manifesting in an apparent increase in school shootings.
Well, yeah, so you should still defend yourself kind of at all times, basically. But, yeah, that's not going to stop them from attempting it.
No. This is the Call to Freedom. We're going to be back with more of this, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. This is the Call to Freedom, and maybe you listen regularly to the show and have been wondering how you can show your support. Well, social media shares certainly go a long way, but so does cash. And you can do that using Patreon at patreon.com/call-to-freedom. Our wonderful patrons there are currently helping to keep the show up and running, including the podcast at call-to-freedomlive.podbean.com. And we can't thank them enough for their efforts. Once more, that's patreon.com/call-to-freedom if you would like to check it out. We also post there almost daily before the show kicks off, and at least once a week as a sort of preview of the things going on that week. So we've been talking about active shooter drills going on campus and school campuses, and how they are traumatizing children. Not only are these things existent, but 42 states in the United States require some sort of these types of drills, according to Education Commission of the States. But there's no research on the drill's effectiveness, and while there are some federal recommendations, which mean absolutely nothing to anyone here, especially if there's no research to even back it in the first place.
Yeah, come on.
It's like the federal government just proclaimed this, and that's it.
Oh, I'm sure they did research, and I'm sure it's meeting exactly what their goals were.
Yeah, it's just, they pulled it out of their you know where.
Well, no, I'm sure they know. So,
good God,
their stated goals.
Hold on. Over the past 2 decades, the drills have ramped up in intensity, with some schools going as far as to use fake blood and fire blanks at students. Okay, I feel like I should inform you. If I have a child and you do one of these active shooter drills and you shoot a blank at my child, I'm going to put a real bullet in your head because you shot at my child. I don't care that the gun ultimately turned out to be shooting a blank. You shot at my child. You monster, you don't deserve to live. That would be my response to that. And of course, they mentioned the Indian. I'm assuming you don't disagree.
No, that's fine. I mean, my only question would be like, why would? I feel like somebody like you would probably be less likely to have their kid in a public school in the first place. But if for some reason that happens, like you lose a custody battle to somebody who's not even the other parent or something, one of those weird things, like
it would be a really bizarre set of circumstances.
Yeah.
So they mentioned the Indiana school shooting that prompted outrage when teachers were shot execution style with pellet guns, leaving some of them injured. But at the same time, students' anxieties have swelled, sort of like how people were terrified during the 50s through the 80s of nuclear war with Russia, or Soviet Russia. Some are not told that the lockdowns are just drills, prompting them to send what they believe are final goodbyes over text to their parents. Jesus Christ.
God. I didn't even know that.
Can you imagine?
That was horrible.
Being a parent. Look, and I only have cats, and I do love my cats. I don't treat them like, they're kids or anything like that, but I feel like I probably love my cats more so than I love most humans. And I don't particularly have any attachment to like my nephew that I don't have for my cats. And I mean that to no insult whatsoever to my nephew, but all I have are cats. So that's my perspective when dealing with stuff like this. And just the thought of my cats, dying is quite often enough to get me ready to cry. I can't imagine what someone with these sorts of parental bonds to their kids feels like when they receive a text message from their kids that's a final goodbye because there's a school shooter. So you're not just traumatizing kids at this point. You're traumatizing parents as well.
Yes.
So kids are also fainting and throwing up. Others are afraid to go to school in the days following the drills. Oh my God. I'm stunned that we as a society, that we as individuals have allowed this to happen. Children are texting their parents final goodbyes because of our rampant hysteria in response to relatively rare school shootings.
No, and over the break, I pulled up some stats. I found a 2018 March article in the Washington Post, which told us the chances of on any day of your child dying in a school shooting are 1 in 614 million.
Okay, follow-up question. How many days does the average child spend in public education?
About 180 days a year for about 12 years. So that's...
Let's just be even to say about 12,000. About 12,000 days.
Okay, that's
12,000 out of about 600 million. I mean, I realize statistics don't exactly work that way. But that if you have a chance of getting that result 600-something times, you basically are rolling the dice 12,000 times.
Yeah, you're playing the $1.5 billion Powerball and losing.
Yeah, because it's still going to be exceedingly rare.
Right. But,
the average chance of a person being shot in a school shooting isn't really that relevant, I would speculate, to a parent who has a child who could very well be.
If it actually happened to you, then it happened.
Yeah. It's kind of like it is kind of like winning the lottery in reverse. Yeah, obviously, I think we have to put that qualifier out there. But for the parents who lose children in school shootings, I don't think the numbers really make them feel any better when they go, oh, well, don't worry. There was only a 1 in 600 million chance of this happening, so don't let your grief infect you to the extent that you try to prevent this from happening to some other child, because it's not likely.
Well, right, and all of that's true. The thing is, though, so just because... So then Okay, so then the conclusion is we should do something about it, but that doesn't mean that everything you do is, in fact, doing something about it. I mean, as far as I know, even, like, the military doesn't do, like, fake invasion drills. Maybe I'm wrong. I've never heard of anything like that. Like,
I think they probably do.
Yeah, well, they do drills and training and all that, but everybody knows it's a drill going in.
Right, so then it's, that's what I'm saying. Like, you as an adult who signed up for this in most cases, they're like, okay, we're going to have a drill. This is how it's going to be. Oh, yeah, by the way, we train you first. That's not the same thing as them, even in the military, if they just came in and they're like, oh, we're being bombed, but actually you weren't.
It reminds me of Jessica's Law. Jessica's Law, for those unfamiliar, is a stupid little law we have here in New Hampshire that allows you to be pulled over for having any ice or snow on your vehicle. And the reason we have this law is because some 18-wheeler was driving down the street with a sheet of ice on its bed.
Mm-hmm.
And or something, I don't know. They almost hit another truck, or the other truck almost hit them or something. And it caused the sheet of ice to fly off of their vehicle and hit and kill, like, this 16-year-old girl named Jennifer or Jessica, whatever it was. I think it's Jessica.
Jessica, yeah.
So they were like, okay, well, we have to make it illegal then for people to drive around with any ice or snow on their vehicles. And according to news reports, the police made extensive use of this during this last year, during all of the snow and ice. It's an overreaction, an extreme overreaction to something that is extraordinarily rare.
At least
in the first
that
place.
is related. So telling people you can't have ice on your roof is related to ice falling off of people's roofs. Randomly pointing guns at kids.
Well, it was off of their vehicles. It was that,
the roof of your vehicle.
Okay.
So randomly traumatizing 3-year-olds is not in any way related to military preparedness.
The vast majority of whom will never actually experience an active shooter.
Or combat preparedness, I should say, because I guess school shooters aren't a military. So combat preparedness has nothing to do with this. It's not training. They're not telling you what you should do. Usually you teach material before you test it, if you're a sane person.
Well, I thought they do teach it. They go, okay, well, in the event of this shooter, you're going to do this and this and that and whatever. I don't know what they actually teach. But I thought they do instruct prior to these drills. They don't just randomly one day go, oh, my God, there's a school shooter. Everybody do some random thing that comes to their minds. They have already instructed them at that point what they should do in the event that something like that happens.
Well, they should, but apparently they don't always do that.
Okay, well, maybe they do, and then that's a little bit different. But it's still the instructions from what I've seen from schools of instructions, or even from corporations for instructions of what to do in these type of situations, is completely ridiculous.
Yeah, throw a stapler at them.
Yeah, so
that's pretty ridiculous.
I'm not going to throw a stapler at somebody who outpowers me. I'm not going to try to negotiate with cups of water with somebody who has a gun and I don't, which is also a recommendation.
Hold on, what?
Yeah, so you're supposed to ask them if they want water or something.
So
they told us to ask the shooter if they wanted water.
So
what the hell is that all about?
So somebody comes in with a gun, actively shooting, and you're supposed to pull a Kardashian and be like, "Here's a Pepsi."
Yes.
That's insane. This has been the Call to Freedom. Don't go anywhere though, because Free Talk Live is coming up next.